Welcome back. New this morning, GE Aerospace announcing $1 billion investment in the company's manufacturing operations and facilities across the country. It's part of an effort accelerating engine deliveries and increasing production of parts to keep pace with military demand. More than $275 million going toward defense facility upgrades. That will create 5,000 American jobs. Joining me now in this Fox Business exclusive is GE Aerospace CEO and Chairman Larry Culp. Larry, it's great to have you this morning. Welcome back.
Thank you, Maria. Good to be with you.
Well, let me just say, first off, congratulations. You have been running this company incredibly well, and it is showing through the stock and through your operations and your earnings. Tell us first, given the fact that you are running the most valuable industrial aerospace company in the world right now, tell us right now what is driving business before we get into this latest investment.
Well, Maria, you're very kind. We have a team nearly 60,000 strong around the world doing, I think, a phenomenal job supporting our airline customers, our airframer partners, and our military customers, particularly the U.S. military, at a time where we're seeing tremendous demand. We have here coming into 2026 nearly $200 billion of backlog. People are flying, airlines looking to expand and modernize, as is the U.S. military and our allies around the world. And given the installed base that we have, both in commercial and on the military side of things, we could not be busier, but happily so.
That's wonderful. And, of course, airline demand is booming. Defense budgets are rising. The president's calling for a $1.5 trillion defense budget in 2027. And you have heeded the call from President Trump to ramp up investment in the United States. Tell us about this most recent investment in your facility, sir.
Maria, what we're rolling out this morning is the news that we're going to invest another $1 billion here in 2026. We'll do that in 30 communities across 17 states where we operate. I'm here today in Durham, North Carolina. This is our largest engine assembly facility in the country. Behind me is one of our LEAP engines. These are the engines that are under wing with both the Boeing 737 MAX and the Airbus A320neo family. We are ramping production here dramatically, and this investment will allow us to continue to deliver more engines as airlines expand and modernize their fleets. It will also give us the ability to deliver a number of reliability and durability enhancements to our engines, all the while supporting the U.S. warfighter. $275 million, in fact, of that $1 billion investment is geared towards supporting our ramping in defense production.
Yeah, I want to hear more about that, because we're talking all morning about the defense infrastructure and what the government is relying on here, particularly as it relates to the Iran conflict. These are long-term contracts, and these are long-term investments that you're talking about, whether it's an airline or a contract from government. How much does one of those engines cost?
Well, it depends, Maria, on what engine you're talking about, but we're clearly talking about initial purchases that are well in excess of, say, $10 million. Wow. But what's important for our customers is the cost of ownership over the 20 to 30-year life cycle that engine will be in operation. One of the wonderful aspects of this business is we not only sell that engine when those new airplanes are delivered, we live with that engine side by side with our airline customers throughout the course of that life cycle. So it really is that all-in cost of ownership that is critical, and part of the reason we're putting in the capital that we are to enhance the reliability and durability of the engines. We power the better part of 3/4 of all the commercial departures around the world on a daily basis. We have 1 million people in the air currently with GE technology under wing. It's an incredible responsibility we all take very seriously. These investments, which come on the heels, you'll recall a year ago we were together, we talked about investing another $1 billion in 2025. We did that. But we're on a multi-year ramp, Maria, given that $200 billion backlog. We'll need to continue to invest to support our commercial customers. But again, we're doing the same thing to support the U.S. warfighters and our allies around the world.
So what do you want to say about a bottleneck in the supply chain? Explain to us what's going on with regard to the supply chain and how fast you can churn these products out.
Well, Maria, I think the last several years we've made tremendous progress hand in hand with our suppliers to come out of the pandemic and ramp production as not only fleets are expanded, but the current fleets are used at record levels. We saw last year a 40% increase in the inputs we received from our key suppliers, really as a result of that collaboration. And in turn, depending on the platform that you're talking about, our engine shipments were up 25 to 30%. So we think we know what we need to do here, but this is going to be a multi-year effort given the nature of the demand curve that we're looking at. It's a high-class challenge to have, but one I think the GE Aerospace team and our supplier partners are keen to tackle.
And Larry, what do you want to say about jobs here, given this $1 billion, this additional $1 billion that you're investing in your facilities? How many jobs does that create? What can you tell us about the use of AI and how that's complementing certain jobs? Give us the picture of jobs at GE Aerospace today.
Maria, coupled with today's announcements, we are also sharing our intent to expand our workforce by another 5,000 people here in 2026. We did that same number, ironically, in 2025. That really gives us the expertise and the capacity to continue to increase production, not only in 2026, but it sets the stage for us to do so every year into the 2030s. That's the nature of the mountain that we're climbing here at GE Aerospace. Certainly, AI is a part of what we're doing, not only to improve productivity on the shop floor, but frankly, to enhance safety and quality. The more that we can put into the hands of our operators, not only here in Durham, but around the country, the latest tools that make the most impact, given the incredible data access we have through those 20 to 30-year life cycles in these engines, the better off we're going to be, not only when we're manufacturing a new engine, but when we're looking after those engines for decades over those life cycles I mentioned earlier.
Yeah. Now, in terms of being a government contractor, GE Aerospace landing this contract from the Defense Logistics Agency to accelerate the readiness of that J-85 engine, powering the U.S. Air Force's primary training aircraft. GE will provide fleet management, supply optimization capabilities, supporting the Air Force's training mission and goals. Larry, congrats on that deal. Tell us more about this product, how GE is playing a key part in the military's goals right now, specifically as we're talking about the Middle East.
Well, Maria, we talk so often about our commercial business, but about a third of what we do is in the defense realm. We're fortunate that over time we have built up a position where we power 2/3 of the U.S. military aircraft, be they combat jets, be they helicopters and the like. There's a lot that we're doing. We were up again 30% in terms of our engine deliveries to the military in 2025. The announcement that you're referring to will enable us to support our J-85 engine on the Air Force's T-38 trainer. The more that we're able to orchestrate the delivery of the 6,000 parts that go into that engine, that will enable those trainers to be in the air more with pilots getting more training hours. That has a direct knock-on effect for U.S. readiness. So we're happy to contribute. It's one of many things that we do across the U.S. military portfolio, but in an important part, particularly in today's world.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the president met with the defense contractors at the White House on Friday. I know you were not there, but the president came out of that meeting and said that they have promised to quadruple production of some of these weapons. Larry, why is it that it takes as long as it does to actually meet the incredible demand that we're talking about? And can you assess for us sort of the issues that are at hand in that regard?
Well, in many respects, the issues with respect to lead times on the defense side of things, Maria, are very similar to the ones on the commercial side. The tooling required to build these engines has very long lead times. We've been looking to, we've been looking to reduce those lead times across our supply base. I think we're making progress. But also one of the things the president has initiated is really a look at procurement reform. And we're big supporters of that, because the more that we can streamline the processes by which we develop an engine and in turn an aircraft, test times, if we can deploy some of our commercial techniques in the defense realm, we know we're going to take time out of the system. We're going to take costs out of the system without sacrificing safety or quality. So there's a lot of opportunity. We've got a role to play. And part of this multi-year investment effort that we've made, it'll be $600 million that we will have invested in our defense footprint over the last 3 years, is very much geared toward not only raising production, but quickening the pace of what we're doing for the U.S. warfighter. That's a no-fail mission for us. at GE Aerospace, and we're proud to be on board.
And Larry, this is all coming across in all of your earnings releases. I mean, you recently released your fourth quarter 2025 numbers, surpassing expectations. Your board authorized a quarterly dividend. You are really operating at an incredibly high level. I want to get your take on policy and what you'd like to see in terms of changes there. You were pushing in the past for zero tariffs in aviation. And, you know, when I've interviewed President Trump in the past, the president told me when we talked about China, look, they need us as much as we need them, you know, and he mentioned jet engines. He mentioned aerospace as sort of one leverage point that the United States has. What would be your best advice for the president as he gears up for this meeting with Xi Jinping at the end of March?
Well, the president, I think, has been an exceptionally strong supporter of the aerospace industry. He's fully aware that aerospace is a net exporter for the country to the tune of $75 billion annually. I think as we saw a number of the trade deals come together last year, we were encouraged by the zero for zero tariff construct that was put in many of those deals. I think that will continue to be a priority for the administration. We support that because it allows American companies in aerospace to invest in technology, invest in people, build capacity, and deliver our products all around the world. That's good for American workers, and that's certainly good for the economy at large.
Yeah, I mean, you know, GE, as much as it's a customer, it's a #1 adversary of the United States. So that's why I raised the issue. I saw the presentation at the Singapore Air Show, which was very, very positive, and investors talked about that in terms of the performance of the company. We just looked at the stock chart of GE, and it's doing so well over the last couple of years. Straight line up. Larry, what do you want to say about the future and what drives the business in the coming couple of years?
Well, Maria, you're very kind. We had an exceptional 2025. Revenues up, 21%, earnings up 38%, cash flow was up 24%. But we are not a team that will rest on its laurels. We know our airline customers, our airframer partners, and our defense customers all need more from us in 2026. We're investing, we're improving processes, we're bringing on new people to make sure that we not only have another good 2026, but really put together a decade of outstanding performance that sets us up for the 2030s. This is the ultimate long cycle business. We're going to continue to play the long game, and I couldn't be more thankful for the great work that our teams, not only here in Durham, but around the world, do with that mission in mind.
And, of course, you've got the pricing power to go along with it. Larry, it's good to see you this morning. We'll be watching the story. Thank you, sir.